Is your interview process preventing you from hiring A players? And what can you do about it if it is? We'll find out in this episode. So it's not your first rodeo. You've sat through hundreds of interviews, or at least you've got some interviewing experience as a hiring manager. When someone sits across you in the interview room, you think, is this person a good hire or will they be a bad hire? That puts you on the defense. That is the first thing that could prevent you from hiring an A player. You start thinking that after you've hired a few people a few times, because sometimes you get bad hires and that puts you on the defense. Some folks are easy cuts during interviews. There's just something off about their behavior or their credentials just don't match up. But you can write off some of the good ones by accident. The wild cards. And some of these wild cards could potentially be your A players in the future. So they aren't awful at their job, but they didn't interview well. And because you were on the defense during interview, they didn't make the cut. Maybe it's the interview questions. Some A players are just really bad at traditional interview questions, and you know we all like to use traditional interview questions to weed out the wheat from the chaff. These traditional interview questions can include ones like, what's your greatest weak? That's easy game for slick talkers. To a question like, what's your greatest weakness? They could say something like, my greatest weakness is I care too much. They're not always the best hires, these slick talkers. They may talk the talk, but they may not necessarily walk the walk. Now, you may be lucky sometimes. Sometimes you get an A player who's done the whole interview training process, so they know what to expect. But a lot of the times, you'll find that A players are just, they're not too fussed about the whole interview process because they are so confident in their work. They feel that their work will speak volumes for them. So that's what happened. These guys walk in, the A players walk in thinking, well, I got a lot of jobs without having to go through a tough interview process. People looked at my work and they just hired me on the spot. So this can happen again. So here's the predicament. You've got these A players you're sifting out from your candidate pool. What are you going to do about it? You want to keep those wildcard A players in, the ones who don't interview well. The big boys like Google found this to be a problem for themselves. They've got a lot of data on this because they've been doing this for a long time. So, what they found was when they did behavioral interviewing, they were able to get more A players through to the final rounds. With behavioral interviewing, the idea is that you're asking interview questions about the candidate's past work behaviors. Past behaviors are usually repeated by great people. The same goes for people who are not so great. You're not trying to be mean to anyone here. You just want to hire the right person. So better than having a traditional interview question which is open, quite vague. A lot of people may not be aware of the best answer. A potential A player might give an answer that you might not like during those traditional questions. Like, let's go back to what is your greatest weakness? They might say something like, I get impatient sometimes. If my coworkers aren't doing the job, I will tell them and I will help them, but I need to get the job done. However your team operates, this may seem like you may get a little bit aggressive with your coworkers. If you operate in a very casual environment or you're very much about coworkers working well together, you might think, well, this person might actually harass other coworkers to do the work. You never know what's going through the back of your mind when you're making these decisions. You're thinking about, is this person going to be a good fit for my team as well as doing the job very well? You probably want to know how to address that issue. So we went to behavioral interviewing questions. So here's a sample question in behavioral interviewing for you. Think of a time in your previous job when a customer was unhappy. How did you handle that situation? It shows you their process and it shows you how well they work in a specific area. A lot of interviewers, like in Google, repeat this process for every single responsibility they know that the candidate will have if they get hired. It's a long process, but it also helps in the long run. It reduces the likelihood of having a bad hire, which you know you don't want. Here's one more tip for making these interview questions a lot easier. When asking questions like this, I find it useful to have an inner dialogue. The type of dialogue that challenges my perceptions about the individual. I like to think, can this person be a key contributor? Would I want this person to be my boss? So there you have it. These two things, behavioral interviewing and that inner dialogue, these two things should actually help you figure out whether someone is really a true A player. Alright, I'm going to keep working on these videos. You can tell the lighting's not that great, sound's not so great. The camera's a smartphone, but stay tuned. Subscribe below and keep improving on these videos for you to improve your boss IQ.